Boris Johnson flew to Afghanistan to avoid Heathrow vote. Boris Johnson has had urgent business in Afghanistan, very conveniently during the key vote on a new Heathrow runway. The Foreign Secretary could have been forced to quit the government without the trip, which approximately nobody believes was just a coincidence. If he had been there for the vote, he would have been in a tricky situation as he vowed to oppose a third runway, but all Tory MPs have been told to vote in favor. The Afghan Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed he had met Deputy Foreign Minister Hekmat Khalil Karzai for talks in Kabul after the Foreign Office had earlier refused to disclose his destination on security grounds. Earlier Mr. Johnson defended his decision not to take part in the vote at 10 p.m. tonight, saying his resignation would have achieved absolutely nothing. It comes after International Trade Minister Greg Hands resigned in protest rather than vote in favor of the third runway. The Foreign Secretary faced widespread derision after he chose to be out of the country on official business. His absence meant he was able to avoid a choice between voting against Heathrow expansion on a three-line whip, which would have meant quitting as Foreign Secretary, or supporting the government in order to keep his job. In an open letter to constituents in his West London seat, quoted in the Evening Standard, he said, "My resignation would have achieved absolutely nothing." Jeremy Corbyn poured scorn on Mr. Johnson's decision to stay away, despite his Uxbridge and South Ruislip constituency lying under the Heathrow flight path and his past promise to lie down in front of those bulldozers to prevent expansion going ahead. The Labour leader said, "I would have thought, if nothing else, as a constituency MP he would want to be in the Commons because, after all, his constituency is very, very near to Heathrow. And he has in the past made very strong statements against Heathrow, and, indeed, once he promised to lie down in front of a bulldozer on it. If he is unable to be present, then we have to ask the question, what on earth is he doing and who is he representing?" Gray to arrive back in the UK at Luton Airport in time for the match today and to vote against Heathrow expansion tomorrow. "I wouldn't want to be abroad for either of those. Commitments." Greg Hands, at Greg Hands, June 24, 2018. In his letter, Mr. Johnson said he had been urged by local councillors to carry on in office so that he could continue to oppose a third runway from within the government. "I have long been an opponent of a third runway at Heathrow, and that is why I am not voting for it tonight. I have made clear my opposition since joining the government, and I will continue to lobby colleagues from within government. Some of my critics have suggested that I should resign over the issue. No doubt they have my best interests at heart. But it is clear from what is likely to be a large majority of MPs who are in favor of a third runway that my resignation would have achieved absolutely nothing. Hillingdon Council have been emphatic that they would rather have me in the cabinet and fighting for their cause on this and other issues." He added, "On election night I promised with John McDonnell, the Labour MP, to lie in front of the bulldozers. In view of the very considerable difficulties that still face the third runway, its cost and the appalling air and noise pollution entailed by the project, I believe it will be a very long time before we have to make good on that pledge, if indeed a third runway ever comes about." Mr. Johnson's decision to avoid the vote was thrown into sharp relief by his fellow West London MP Greg Hands, who last week quit as International Trade Minister so he could honour an election pledge to vote against Heathrow expansion. In a tweet on Sunday, Mr. Hands wrote pointedly, "Great to arrive back in the UK at Luton Airport in time for the England match today and to vote against Heathrow expansion tomorrow. I wouldn't want to be abroad for either of those commitments." More, female taxi drivers hit Saudi Arabia's streets after ban ends. More, the result of Turkey's election is a disaster for the country's democracy.